Hey, Redcasters, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Go Big Red.
Welcome to the Go Big Redcast, the Husker Fan Sports Show.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Go Big Redcast, a very special HuskHer Huddle edition that we have so lovingly called Put On Your Dancing Shoes, because the Nebraska women's basketball team is indeed going dancing in the NCAA Tournament for the second year in a row, which is really exciting. And as always, once again, having our expert in women's basketball, Matt Coatney. So welcome back. Matt told you we'd try to get you back on.
You were successful, Abbie. It's been great, and it's been nice seeing you in such places as West Lafayette, Indiana, Champaign, Illinois, Indianapolis. You've been on the road quite a bit, so
all the places.
I think you're following me around now. So this is nice.
I've been pestering you is really all it is. I just keep No, it's been great. I've had a blast this season covering the couple of games that I've had, hoping to do more next season. And of course, like getting to know you and getting to talk to you at all of these and learn just a little bit more each time has been a blast. So I'm, again, very thankful that you are giving your time as you prepare to head out for our first game against Louisville in Fort Worth, correct? That's right. Okay. So thank you for giving a little bit of your time in that. We have a fairly loosey-goosey type show today. It's just us. There's no producers. But if you have comments, if anybody's watching, listening, and have comments, questions, please feel free to send them. We'll get to them. We'll include them. Anything that we do. So the idea for today is we'll do just a little look back on how the season went. We did an overview. We did a welcome to basketball type show. And this is just closing the book on the regular season and looking forward to the tournament and what we have going on, both as Nebraska fans and as part of a conference that has a record-setting 12 teams in the tournament this year. So you called it that this was going to be a really tough season for the Big Ten. There's a lot of really good teams, and we've seen it play out in the season, and now with all these teams getting to the postseason this year.
Yeah, and teams like Minnesota that didn't make the NCAA tournament, that were right on the bubble, certainly I think were a team that could have made it, and deservingly so. That's how tough it is, and for Nebraska to go 10-8 in the Big Ten. As tough as this league has been this year, adding the West Coast teams, and I think everybody saw UCLA, USC, that could be the national championship or a Final Four matchup. Washington, Oregon, solid team. So it's not like the Little Sisters of the Poor got added to this league that already had great teams like Ohio State, Maryland, Minnesota, Iowa, on and on and on. So for Amy Williams and her team to go 10-8, even without injuries, it would have been a very successful season.
Matt, so speaking of, we went 10-8, I think maybe one or two losses that we think like, would have liked to have that one back. Maybe if we were at full strength would have had it, but then had a couple wins that I think we can admit were pretty surprising. I mean, Maryland being the big one, but Michigan State, Iowa, Oregon. Is this record of 10-8, is that what you would have expected this year, or kind of what are your thoughts on that?
Well, everybody always asks me in the summer, how's Nebraska going to be? And I always say, well, tell me who the roster is in October, because in the summer I wouldn't have known Petra Bojan was on the team. In the summer, I wouldn't have known Natalie Potts wouldn't have played 95% of the schedule. In the summer, I wouldn't have known Allison Widener would have missed over half of the schedule. So I never really like projecting during the summer what's going to happen. But I think that Nebraska really slated to be a top 5 or 6 team in this league with Natalie Potts and with the healthy Allison Widener. So when you don't have them, you have an adjustment period. How are you going to play without those people? And then once you've adjusted, then you kind of reassess. The other thing that it's hard to tell in the summer is who are you going to be playing against? Who's on the other teams? You know, you look at Maryland and you think, well, Christina Dulce transferred there, and you think she's going to be potentially first team All Big Ten. It didn't really pan out that way. So, but I would have thought Nebraska would have been a potential 11 or 12 win team in the Big Ten if everybody was healthy. But you know, things happen during the year, so you know, you adjust based on the personnel. And so I think Nebraska finished about where they should have with the personnel they had.
And can we talk about that? That was something that during the tournament and on the way home from the tournament, my fiance kept talking about. He goes, "I'm just so impressed. You guys lost Natalie Potts and still did that. You lost Allison and still were able to make that run." I don't want to say, does that surprise you? But was there some surprise that the team was able to be that resilient, and that, you know, Jess Petrie she's the one I think of the most because she really stepped up for Nat, but that like Jess and Petra and even Amaya really played really well, kind of stepping into those roles. Birdie's another one who I think we kind of knew she'd be good, but man alive, looking at her stats coming down towards the end of the season, really, really came alive for this team.
Well, credit the coaching staff for going to Birdie Remdahl and saying, we need you to be more aggressive and get into the paint and get to the rim. And she did that. And down the stretch, she kind of had kind of down the stretch season that Callan Hake had and Logan Nisley had at the end of last year, where the switch flipped on down the last 10 games for Hake and Nisley last year. Petrie is somebody who probably had the biggest impact on this team because she, more than anybody, played the Natalie Potts offensive role. Nobody replaced Potts' defense. You know, Potts was at the front of the pressure defense, was a hound, could guard 1 through 5 on the other team. And you just don't really have that. Most teams don't have that position. But Petrie became a lot more comfortable in her role. Sometimes when you get playing time, when you know you're not coming off the floor, you get a lot more comfortable. And I saw that with Petrie. And I'm glad you brought up Amaya Hargrove, you know, a freshman who had to really come in, play big minutes. The win at Iowa, you can look at what Amaya Hargrove did. She hit some huge shots. So really it was a team effort trying to replace Potts and to a lesser extent Widener.
Yeah. I felt like they did we talked about that there were probably a couple games that, you know, if you had Natalie, probably would have come out a little bit differently. Creighton would be one that we would have loved to have seen a healthy Natalie Potts play in, but it was always so impressive because you never know. And even when I feel like even when you have a team that you really like and all the, you know, everybody's really there together, a major injury like that, sometimes you just don't quite know how teams will respond to it. And so I equally was very impressed.
Think about this. You've got a true freshman point guard in Britt Prince who's learning to play with Natalie Potts and Alexis Markowski and Callan Hake and on and on and on. And then you take Potts out of that after they got a comfort level in the summer and playing pickup games and playing against practice players. And now that freshman point guard has to readjust and figure out, okay, how do we play without Potts? How do we play with Petrie? How do we play with Hargrove? So I think Britt Prince needs a big pat on the back for learning how to play with really 2 different teams this year in a very short amount of time.
Gives you a lot of faith for how she might continue to grow in her time at Nebraska. I don't want to look ahead. I'm trying really hard not to do the let's talk about how they'll do in the future. But I just feel like that's a good sign that she was able to adjust that way. Like you said, essentially playing with 2 different teams in the same season. So there's some hope there.
Yeah, and her defense improved exponentially. I think early in the season, her defense reminded a lot of people, like a lot of freshmen that come in. The defense playing at the major Division I level is not even in the conversation for what you see in high school. And her active hands were really a big part of why Nebraska was able to have the success they had this year. Yeah,
she was a ton of fun to watch in the tournament all season long, but particularly the tournament, those last couple of games, it was just like you could see, you saw that development through the season really show off as it progressed. And so it's what you like to see, right? Especially from freshmen.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Matt, I think I know one of the answers to this, but what were some of your favorite games this season?
Gonna surprise you and tell you
Okay.
the one you obviously the win at Iowa, but so I'm not going to talk about that one first.
Okay.
The win at Rutgers was very
Yep.
necessary. Nebraska has struggled against that team, and Rutgers just hasn't been very good since C. Vivian Stringer retired. Nebraska lost a close game here to them last year, and that was one of the most disappointing losses I've ever been a part of. 2 years ago, they went to New Jersey and missed their first 22 three-pointers and got beat by a Rutgers team they should have beaten. And they gave up 30, what was it? How many points did their freshmen have? 34, 35 points. Yes, it's still won the game. They found a way. That is a tough place to play. And so that was one of my favorite wins for the team. You go on the road in this league and you get a win, you pat yourself on the back because it's like getting a win and a half at home. I think the win over Michigan State is also up there because Michigan State, we knew was going to have a really good year. Their pressure defense is the kind of defense that bothers Nebraska or has in the past, especially with a true freshman point guard in Britt Princeton. You look at what Allison Widener did in that game, and you saw what Nebraska could do. And unfortunately, we all kind of thought, okay, Al's back. And then, she got hurt immediately after that. And then obviously the win at Iowa and the way Nebraska came back. And it's one of the few times, Abbie, in which I've walked to the back of the plane or the bus and told the team how proud I was of them. The story there was I went back and I said, I've never seen a team that's had that much guts to go on the road and win a game like that. And Amy Williams told me a couple of days later that Bertie Rimdahl, who's from Denmark, said, Matt came back and said we had guts. What does that mean? Is that a good thing? So the English didn't translate. I don't speak Denmarkese, apparently. So for just that reaction to what I told the team, it's probably one of my favorite wins.
Yeah, that's not the game I thought you were going to pick. I thought for sure you'd go Maryland.
Well, here's the thing. Nebraska's beaten Maryland now 4 of the last 5 times, I think it is. The Allison Widener game at College Park is one of my all-time favorite games. When I was in the Navy, I lived 12 miles from the Xfinity Center. I called an NCAA tournament game for Southwest Missouri State at the old Cole Fieldhouse. Maryland feels like a home game to me. And Nebraska had lost 15 straight games there. So getting that monkey off the back there, that was significant. And then winning here at Lincoln on New Year's Eve a couple of years ago, and then winning in the Big Ten tournament. When Jazz Shelley just had a remarkable game. So Nebraska's beaten Maryland at Maryland, in Lincoln, and on a neutral site. So how do I say that it was a good win? Don't get me wrong. But Nebraska's certainly capable of beating Maryland. So, it was a big win. But for other reasons, that's why I didn't think you would think that I said the Rutgers game. Yeah,
that one I remember thinking. I remember thinking like that's the Nebraska we could like. That felt like that game, especially having been down so far at Maryland when they were ranked after coming off of all of those losses that you just thought like, okay, this is that Nebraska team that we know and we know they're capable of being. And it was such a fun game. And then dang Illinois game the day after the next time that just we talked about that really felt they should have won that one and really glad they got their revenge in the tournament against Illinois.
The team felt like they owed Illinois that. But here's the other thing. Back-to-back road games. So tough in any league. You're in the Missouri Valley, you're in Conference USA, the Big Ten, wherever it is. You get an emotional win at Maryland, and then so much of basketball is matchups. And Nebraska had a hard time checking Adelia McKenzie and that style of play. And so, you think, why can't we do that every time? It's just not that way. Life isn't fair that way.
Yeah, it was so fun to watch. And it just, I think, and then there was something about that though, that when I watched, I just thought, they might do it, even down so far. I was like, I don't know, guys, that they might be able to do it. And it was just nice to feel, everybody likes to be right, but it was nice then to be like, I knew that. I felt that. Then you don't feel that every game. And I would have been really sad if if that feeling hadn't been, but it was, to me, that was a really nice, like resilient, gutsy, gritty game that they had to push really hard for. And it's just always really fun to see your teams able to kind of mentally get themselves out of that hole that they were in the first quarter.
You bring up a good point. I don't think fans think about it enough. It's a mental game.
Yeah.
So much the difference between the talent for all these teams, especially the Big Ten, razor thin.
Mm-hmm.
And so the mental end of it can be such a big part of it, especially rebounding. You don't beat Maryland unless you can rebound. And that's want to. And that's being mentally prepared. But, sometimes you have to have beaten a team to think you can beat them. You lose 15 times in a row as a program. Yeah, I don't care who you are. There's a doubt in the back of your mind, like, oh, no, what's going to happen here? And when Nebraska got down big at Maryland, the players on this team weren't here for those 15 losses. They've been here for the wins. And they're like, we can beat this team. We've beaten this team before. A lot of it is so much the mental approach to it. And I think you saw that during that Maryland game.
It was good. It was overall such a fun season for these women to be able to watch them play and share in their joy for one another. We talk about that a lot in our house too, about they play with such joy. They seem like when they're on the court that they love the game of basketball. They love playing with each other. And you also kind of mentioned this, that it's not always like that not every Nebraska team is like that. Not every team in general is like that. So can you talk a little bit about what you saw out of that dynamic of the team this year?
I've told every head coach I've ever been with, and I've told Amy Williams this, and she knows exactly where I'm coming from. I can tell you generally how the season's going to go from the first bus trip. The first time I get on a bus with a team, there are teams that I love being on the bus with, and this is one of them. And there are teams that I would prefer not to be on the bus with sometimes. And that it doesn't mean they're bad people or bad teams, but you can just feel that chemistry. Each team is a little different. When Emily Cady was playing here and all those great teams, I could tell what the tenor of the team was just by her demeanor on the bus. And I could tell you this team is first team all bus ride, all of them. They get along well. My only complaint about this team is they need some help getting off the bus, because the way you unload is the back of the bus unloads first, the players unload first. And because they're always involved in something goofy or fun or singing a song, sometimes by the time they pick up their special binky or their animal or whatever, it's 5 minutes getting off the bus. And when you're sitting near the front like I am, you're ready to get off the bus. I'm joking, obviously, but it should just tell you just how close this team is. And that camaraderie absolutely spills over to the court. You think about the big key play to beat Illinois in the Big Ten tournament, and Callan Hake, when I talked to her about it, I said that baseline out of bounds play where Jessica Petrie was wide open, that was a conversation the two of them had. They said, hey, on this previous play, this could have worked. And, go ahead, Logan, set this screen. And Logan's like, I don't know, that's a pretty tough place to do it. But they feel so comfortable around each other because of that camaraderie that they figure things out. And that doesn't just happen on the floor. It's those bus rides, and it's those getting together for nachos after practice and that type of thing. And this team has really impressed me with their camaraderie. It's not forced. It's not fake. It's very real, and you can see it when you're around this team.
It just makes you want to root them on more as a fan. I have found that we don't like to – personally, I don't like to bring up other teams when talking about this, but we've watched enough basketball. We watched the men's basketball team kind of struggle, and you could tell as a fan, as somebody watching the games, that like something didn't feel right. Something didn't always feel gelled and connected. But then you watched the women and you went, because this is kind of how, and they, in my mind, kind of set the standard of like what you kind of want a team to look like. So even watching other non-Nebraska teams play, it was nice to kind of have that judgment of like, okay, so this is how it's different in terms of you, and you can see that in their play, which is, I think, again, a testament to Amy for the culture she put in, but for all of those girls for buying into it and really, really making that, it seems like, part of their identity this year.
And not only that, but knowing your role. You know, a lot of fans have asked me, why is Kendall Coley, why is she on the team? They look just at metrics. They look at stats. And when I tell them she's the best communicator on the team, they look at me shocked, and she is. And her suggestions, her basketball IQ is off the charts. And so many successful teams I've been a part of, it's usually a player that fans don't immediately think of because they're always looking at points and rebounds and steals, and it's the intangible things. I've said all year, if anybody's listened to our broadcast, that Callan Hake should have been on the all-defensive team for the Big Ten, and she's not on there, and it's just simply because people look at metrics, and you don't see charges in a stat sheet, but her communication, her feet movement. But one of the things that Callan does, if she's rotating on backside help and then she's out of the game, you want to rotate on backside help if you're playing Callan Hake's position, because you're gonna look bad if you don't take those charges. It's nonverbal leadership that Callan Hake gives to the team, and it's those little tiny things that don't appear on the box score every time. And I look specifically at Kendall Coley and Callan Hake to say, you throw out those metrics and just look at what they're doing on the floor, and it rubs off on their teammates.
Matt, do you happen to know, I know it's not in the box scores, but do we as a university track charges? Like, do we know, is Callan leading the, I feel like she must get like one a game at least.
Yeah. It's not an official NCAA stat, and the machinations that are needed to produce an official NCAA box score are voluminous, but the team tracks that.
Okay.
And so the team has statistics on that. I would say Callan's up there, in the country. There are, I'd say J.J. Quinterly from West Virginia is probably somebody who's high up there. But no, it's I wish it was offensive fouls. It's probably an easier statistic to track than assists. Assists are so subjective. Charges are pretty cut and dry. But that's something the team certainly has numbers on that, but it's not kept, on a national level.
I meant to ask Amy after the UCLA game, but then I thought, well, if she doesn't know the numbers, I don't want to just make her assume. But I kept thinking like she's got to be close to like one a game, and that's got to be huge, because I feel like all the time, every time she's on the floor, I'm just like, well, we'll get one.
And here's the thing. I don't feel like I'm doing a service to the fans when I broadcast a game unless I try and point out something I think is important. I can move the ball around, I can give you the score and all this kind of stuff. But I think Jeff and I have always felt like if we're not trying to tell you why the team is winning, then we're not doing our job. And, when Callan really made an emphasis on her defense in the middle part of the previous season, I really wanted to point that out to fans because it's been exceptional. It's not just the charges. I think if people start looking at her charges and they start looking at her slide step and her foot movement, and then you see her, her mouth moving and her communication, you realize what an exceptional defensive player she is.
She really is. This, again, I don't mean to take away, but that Illinois game that I got to cover, getting to be right behind you, so right next to the bench, essentially right on the court, was probably the most eye-opening game that I've been to. Just like you said, hearing them, you can hear the players.
Is that right?
I heard
really?
Callan,
Okay.
I heard Kendall, I heard the coaches yelling things out and keeping track and calling their things, and I just thought, you heard people yelling their switches and stuff, and you're right, like that's hard, I think, if you haven't played, to really get across to people, is that impact that those players have when it's not, their 3-point percentage, which is also important, right? We need to shoot baskets and get blocks and all of that. But there is that, like you said, there's so many of those intangible tracked things and that game really, really opened my ears, I guess, to what that game looks like for those players, for those like non-Alexis Markowskis and Britt Princes.
I think the average fan, if they've not played and they don't sit, like you were saying, right next to the team, they have no idea how important communication is and how sometimes it takes years for a college player to become a good communicator. It's not really anything you do too much in high school. They're usually your best player. You play man defense, that type of thing. I don't really call out defenses as much anymore unless it's obvious, because every team plays some kind of switching man-to-man defense. There's really not a lot of zone anymore, but every team has zone concepts, and it's all about communication based on, could be which side of the floor this team's on, or in this situation, if this person's on the floor with this guard, then we're gonna switch differently. And it's all about talking. And the scouting report for that game is crucial. Everybody is like, well, blah, 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 blah. Sometimes a player doesn't follow the scouting report, and that's why you lose a game. And sometimes they follow the scouting report, and the scouting report was wrong. But the communication is so important, and I'm glad you brought it up. It's something that I kind of forget about. I take for granted. And here's somebody like you say, I've never really heard that. It is. I remember talking to somebody when Cam Jurgens, who just won a Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles, when he had his first game at center for Nebraska, and he had a tough game. He was snapping the ball over the quarterback's head. And I said on Big Red Reaction, he's got to make line call adjustments and audibles. And the fan who called in had no idea that the offensive lineman talked. And I was like, that's everything. I mean, it's not just some big guy running into somebody. The communication at all levels of sports, especially basketball, is so huge. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, part of the reason that's why I like doing these is I'm still learning a lot. I'm still a relatively new basketball fan. And so there are these things that, I never knew. And having been in with my actual job, we talk about our actual jobs, where I have to train people. And there is that moment of like, oh, right. No, you wouldn't know this. Like, no, that's right. Because you haven't been doing this as long. So I really love this because you teach me things all the time. You teach all of us things with what you know. But then I think having those questions, I'm going to pat myself on the back there. But coming in as a relatively new fan, asking those questions that maybe feel stupid or kind of obvious aren't, because not everybody, necessarily.
The only dumb questions there are ones that I ask. So
that's fair. No, I'm just kidding. But I do appreciate you, as always, kind of breaking that down and talking more about those things that, like you said, you don't think about because it's what you're used to. So I appreciate that. And again, I used to tell my fiance that like I loved the COVID year. That sounds really bad. I really liked watching sports that COVID year when there's nobody there, because you heard so much. And at the time I didn't know what I was listening for. You mostly just heard coaches, but you do kind of forget how important in every sport that kind of inner team communication is, and getting to hear it is, you kind of wish everybody could have, like, you could just record it and have everybody hear it once.
It's the reason I detest the schools like Minnesota and Michigan that put radio in the upper deck, because I can't hear what's going on. The thing you talk about, the COVID year, I didn't do games in any arena the COVID year, and I can move the ball. I can tell you the score. There's two things that I realized that I completely rely on. One is my hearing. The squeaks, you can hear the if somebody sets a screen, and then my peripheral vision. So many things that I missed out of my peripheral vision, but the audio, what the players are saying, and all of that, it's one of your senses. It's important. It's interesting that you enjoyed the COVID year, because I did not, just to let you know.
That sounds so bad every time I say it. And I obviously don't enjoy the COVID year, but that little piece of it is kind of that silver lining, I guess, for me. So if this is, I think, a great advertisement to go to games. You might not hear everything, but you're going to see more. You're going to hear more than you would on TV.
The other thing is, if you're the average fan and you didn't realize there's communication, and I mean this with football, and I mean this with baseball and any sport, don't watch the ball. I hate being the play-by-play announcer most of the time because I don't get to watch the game the way I want to watch it because you need me to move the ball. And the game is the 80% that's going on away from it. And I don't know how many people have been like, I don't like football. I'm like, why not? They're like, oh, there's too much going on. And I tell them, just watch the middle linebacker. They're like, what? I'm like, if you watch the middle linebacker is going to run to where the play is every time. And it just opens up everything. And when you're watching basketball, I hate that I have to concentrate on the ball because the screening action and the cutting action is away from the ball most of the time. And that's how the play develops. And I'll go back home and I'll record the game and watch it on my DVR. And I'm like, that's why we were so wide. That was that baseline out of bounds play that I was just talking about against Illinois in the Big Ten tournament. I didn't pick up on everything immediately till I looked at a replay because I have to watch the ball. So that's my tip to you. Don't watch the ball.
That's such a good. It's hard though. It's hard to not watch the ball, especially.
Don't think about pink elephants for the next 5 minutes. Yeah, I know what I'm talking about. But if you really want to enjoy the game and get a different perspective, I'm not telling you don't ever watch the ball, but start looking at everything else, and then the game will look a little bit different to you.
It's the way to go. I love that. Now we know what to look for. What a good segue in our upcoming game, which will be Friday at 5 p.m. I got that right. Against Louisville. So Matt, tell us about Louisville. What do you know about them? I know one thing you'll tell me about them, but what do we know about them as a team and how they match up with us?
What's the one thing you think I'm going to tell you about them?
I think you're going to tell us that you know who their head coach is and his relationship with Nebraska.
So I was trying to text you this story the other night. I didn't know what Uber was when it was brand new. Some friends of mine and we were in Kansas City, and we went to a Royals game. Then we wanted to go down to Westport, and they said, let's get an Uber. I didn't know what that was. We get in the car, and the guy has a Louisville Cardinal license plate holder. And I said to him, you're a Louisville fan? He goes, well, that's where I got my degree. I'm an electrical engineer at GE. I'm paying off my bills driving Uber. He goes, but how did you know that was a Louisville Cardinal symbol? Because most people in Missouri think that's a St. Louis Cardinal. Mm-hmm. And being a St. Louis Cardinal fan, I know the difference. But I said, well, a friend of mine's head coach at Louisville. And he goes, oh, Jeff Brom. He thought I was talking about football. And I said, no, it's the women's basketball coach. And he says, you know who Jeff Walls is? And I said, no, he's a good friend of mine. The guy's like, no, I don't believe you even know who Jeff Walls is. And I said, no, he's a really good friend of mine. He's like, I don't believe that. So picked up my phone, and Walls answered, and I said, Walls, I'm in an Uber, whatever that is, in Kansas City on Interstate 70. This guy doesn't even know. He didn't believe I know you. And I handed the driver the phone. Walls sent him 2 tickets to a game. And Jeff was an assistant here. My first during my first coach here at Nebraska, Paul Sandiford. And what an engaging guy. He's had a great career at Louisville, 4 Final Fours, 2 national championship games. And trust me, he will have his team ready to play. Now, they're young. They've got 8 freshmen. And as you know, if you've listened to me before, that means that he had 8 13th graders earlier this year. Now, some of them are truly freshmen right now, like Britt Prince. But this is not the dominant Louisville team that Jeff Walls has had with people like Shoni Schimmel and Angel McCautry. But they will be very ready to play, and they're going to be ready to pressure Nebraska. They had some problems during the ACC tournament due to injury. Those people are back, and they're deep. Even though they're young, they're very deep. And Jeff Walls is hurting because he got knocked out in the first round last year by Middle Tennessee. It's the first time as their head coach at Louisville's got knocked out in the first round. And I think more than anything, that's going to give him a lot of motivation to beat Nebraska. Plus, it's Nebraska, and he was an assistant coach when Amy Gusso-Williams played here. They're very dear friends. They want to beat each other, don't get me wrong, but So there's going to be, it's going to be a very competitive game.
Yeah, I looked over their schedule. They have some big wins.
Well, they're
this
the
year.
only team that beat Duke at Duke this year. They won at Florida State, and I think the thing that I found interesting is their senior Jada Curry. They're 10-2 when she scores at least 14 points, and she scored in big numbers in the win at Duke and the win against Florida State. Now she missed the ACC tournament due to the shoulder injury. Jeff Walz has said she's back at practice and she's going to play. So the easy stat to look at for Louisville is you got to hold Curry under 14 points. Well, you got to hold Lauren Betts under 20 points when you play UC. You got to hold Juju Watkins under 20. I mean, it's easier said than done. But they're very multiple. They're big. Olivia Cochran has played more games in a Louisville Cardinal uniform than anybody. She's a big post, 6'4". They'll go 6'4", 6'3" up front to start, and then they'll come in off the bench with similar size. So they can match up with Alexis Markowski up top. And then a player that I really think is the X factor for Louisville is Taj Roberts. She's a freshman, and she leads the team in steals. You don't usually see a freshman lead a team in steals. If you're going to play for Jeff Walz, you better be able to play pressure defense. And what he wants to do is disrupt you and make you uncomfortable, dismay your offense. And if you're used to coming across half court in 6 seconds, he wants to make it 8 seconds. Those 2 seconds make a little bit of a difference to him. And so he's got a lot of numbers, and he's got people back from injury. So those are some things that stand out to me when I look at Louisville, at first blush.
Okay, so a competitive type game. You don't want to say not competitive, but there's been some teams get games that are a little bit easier than others. So you think of a fairly even match?
This is a Big Ten game. I mean, this is playing Michigan State. This is playing Maryland. This is playing Indiana. It is the same. Like Nebraska has been preparing for this all year. There's not been an easy game in the Big Ten. You look at Louisville, they're a 7 seed. To me, there's no difference between a 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 seed in this tournament. There just isn't. And, Nebraska, if they would have beaten Michigan, probably vaults up to, about a 7 seed in this tournament. It's so razor thin. And so Louisville is very similar in terms of talent,
sure.
The athleticism, that type of thing that Nebraska's seen all year.
That's great. That's the kind of expectation. That's I guess what I was kind of looking for is like, you don't want to say what to expect, but okay, it will be like a Big Ten game, and I like that expectation going in. I like, gives me something to look for in this one and a way to feel about this game.
Yeah. So when Nebraska played Michigan State, you knew they played a lot of people, and they're going to try to turn you over. Louisville's going to play a lot of people, and they're going to try to turn you over. And while they have a player who is their leading scorer, they've won without her. Well, that's also Michigan State. You can't point to Michigan State and say, well, if Julia Ayrault doesn't play, no one else can score. They mix that scoring up. Michigan State is big. They come off the bench with big people. I would say Michigan State is a very similar matchup to what they play differently. I'm not trying to say they're replicas, but in terms of pressuring the ball and how they play, there's a lot of similarities between Louisville and Michigan State, I would say.
So in your mind, what does Nebraska, if Nebraska were to focus on one or two things in this game that will make the biggest difference, in your mind, what are those things? No
live ball turnovers. Live ball turnovers are where Jeff Walz will get you. He used to be an assistant coach for Brenda Freeze at Maryland. He actually called the play that won the national championship for him in 2006, and really kind of vaulted him to the Louisville job. He is really good at changing his defenses at timeouts. So they're playing a certain type of defense. There's a timeout, and so you go, okay, here's how we can do better against that defense. And you come out there and they've changed it. And so now you're like, oh my God, we just spent 30 seconds working on this, and they're not doing that. And where Jeff Walz has been really good is if he does that 2 or 3 times a game, and he takes away 2 or 3 possessions where you don't score, and he wins by 4, guess where he won the game?
Right.
So you can't turn it over in a live ball situation, and that's what he's going to try to do. And he has very quick guards. And I brought up Taj Roberts. She's right at the top, but they're deep. They've got a lot of guards. They got length. Think of Britt Prince with high hands, disrupting, getting a hand in the passing lane. Louisville's going to do a lot of that. So you have to protect the ball. You have to ball fake, shot fake. If you're going to pass to the right, fake left, and then throw right. That's one way of doing that. And then the second thing, and this is basketball 101, you have to win the rebounding battle. The reason Nebraska has been successful recently against Maryland is always one of the best rebounding teams in the country. They win the rebounding battle. And Louisville is not only a great rebounding team, they get putbacks. So I'm not just talking about defensive rebounds. I'm talking about second chance points.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really foul Louisville. For example, Jaden Lloyd, their leading scorer, she's 7th in the nation in free throw percentage. She likes to get to the line. So you've got to play good defense without fouling. And Louisville can hit the 3. It's not what they're known for. They're going to try to get in the lane, get the ball on the rim, get the rebound. With Cochran and some of their other players, Harris, they go 6'4", 6'3". They're usually good at getting those rebounds. So Alexis Markowski, Jess Petrie, really the whole team has to be good. Who's been really good at rebounding, and no one really talks about it? Logan Nisley.
Yeah.
Comes in out of a guard position and gets a lot of rebounds. So team rebounding will be very key. But if you're watching this game, if Nebraska's turning it over, live ball, not good for the Huskers. You can take a dead ball turnover because then you can set up your defense. But if you turn it over in the live ball, all kinds of bad things can happen.
All right. So that's what we'll look for. Husker fans, if you're watching, you're looking for live ball turnovers, rebounding, and that pressure defense of Illinois or of Louisville. Let's see if I can get my 18s correct.
Jeff Walz knows that Nebraska is one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the country. So they're going to make it really hard for Nebraska on closeouts with hand in the face. And so Nebraska's got to be great at ball fake. And one of the things they didn't do well at Illinois, and that contributed to the loss, is movement away from the ball was not very good. And Nebraska really worked on that after that. So if Nebraska wants to hit 5 or 6 threes in the game, which I think they're going to have to win the game, then movement away from the ball has got to be solid.
There we go. I like that. I love having things to look for to kind of know kind of what could contribute. And if it doesn't work out, then maybe what we can point to as reasons. Rebounds. Always rebounds are so important. Matt, this brings me to kind of my next question. And part of this, I think, is just your knowledge of women's basketball and having been part of the sport for as long as you have. How do you as the play-by-play, how do you prepare for these games? Maybe not necessarily Louisville. That's a great example since it's coming up. But just in general, what does your preparation look like as these games come up?
It's the number one question I get. And I tell people it takes me 365 days to prepare for a game. Everything I do, everything is preparation. If I talk to a coach, if I watch a game, I vote on several national committees. And so, if I'm in a hotel room, I remember talking to a friend of mine at Kansas State. I said, tell me, because I've got to submit some names for National Defensive Player of the Year, who you're looking at. And they're like, it starts with J.J. Quinterly at West Virginia, which I knew she was pretty good. But then I started watching a lot of West Virginia games after that. So, by the time you watch West Virginia play Oklahoma State, because you're just focusing on one player, you start realizing, Oklahoma State's pretty good. And so I don't really have an answer for you. I think sometimes when people ask me a question like that, they're talking about, okay, how do you prepare for this game? So I'll break it down to what I do for Louisville. The selection show the other night, I was watching Louisville tape, I guess. I was on my Roku stick within 25 minutes after the selection show was over. I try to watch at least 3 recent games our opponent has played to get their tendencies. I listen to The other announcers, they'll give you tips on why someone isn't playing, what the coach said. Every team has a sports information department. Jeff Grease is the sports information director for Nebraska. I inhale their game notes. Jeff Grease has the best game notes in the country. There's no getting around that. He does basically a new media guide for every game. But those game notes are important for me, but I start with the statistics, and I start looking at the right side of the statistics. I look at assist to turnover ratio. I look at rebound margin, and then I go to the NCAA statistics, and I look at where a team ranks in their conference and where they rank nationally. And if they have, let's say a team ranks 270th in the country in free throw percentage, but they've got a player who's third in the league. Ooh, okay, well, that tells you something, Yep. Numbers, if they're used correctly, can tell you a lot. So it's a big combination of watching a lot of games. People ask me all the time, what's your favorite TV show? And I say Weather Channel and basketball. Yep. If I'm home in basketball season, I'm watching a game or I'm scouting a game, and it'll help me down the road, even if we're not playing somebody. And I talk to all kinds of people. My best friend is the TV voice for Missouri State, and he keeps me pretty up to date on the Missouri Valley. I've got a lot of friends in the old from the Big 12 days. But and then the number one thing I do to prepare for a game is I've got a yellow legal pad. I'm as old school as it gets. And my scorecard is a yellow legal pad, and I've been doing it since 1978, and I know where everything I need is on there for career highs, free throw percentages, trends. I do a running score. It's the most important thing I do. Coaches' records, officials. I don't know if I could talk without my yellow legal pad. I've seen other people do things. It works for me. And when I build that, it's sort of like preparing for a college class. You take notes, not necessarily to go back and review your notes, but if you write something down once, you've kind of committed it to memory twice. Yep. And a lot of times I've written something on my yellow legal pad scorecard that I don't need to look at it again because I've written it down, and so I know what it says. If you ever see me at a game, you won't see me without that yellow legal pad when the game starts, because it's everything. And Jeff Grease says he's told officials when the score's wrong, he's like, he's never wrong. That yellow legal pad, because I don't trust. There's so many things. You've probably seen it in the games you've covered. We get a live stat broadcast where you can see trends and everything. 99% of the time they're great, but it only takes one time for you not to have it. You could be, floating out on an island. So does that help you out on some of the things I do to prepare?
Yeah, that was really helpful. I just, I try. It's hard, when you don't really know what to do and how to prep for this. It's always nice to hear what professionals and people who do it well do. It was one of the things that when I talked to Nate Rohr, we talked about you guys always have these little stories. You always know these little things about players that makes it so interesting, and I think really makes it so enjoyable for us to listen to. And like you said earlier, you want to tell the story about what's happening. But I just think, man, how much, in season, you kind of get, the teams that you'll be playing, the Big Ten teams, that all makes sense. But then these, it's the games against Georgia Tech, it's Louisville, it's these teams that we don't typically see. We don't play a lot. We don't have a lot of common opponents with them, that it just was a little bit more for just my interest of how do you, where does all this come from, and how long does that take, and just what does it look like? So
I'm pretty lucky. I'm either lucky or I'm old, or a combination of both. We played Lindenwood this year. Yep. And you would think, what does Matt Coatney know about Lindenwood? And you would be correct. But I looked on their, I think it was Lindenwood. Maybe I have the team wrong. I think it was Lindenwood. Kind of a throwaway mid-major non-conference game. But one of the assistant coaches, I looked at his name, Ty Morgenthaler. And I'm like, he's got to be related to Jack Morgenthaler. Back when I was an undergrad at Southwest Missouri State, Jack Morgenthaler was a very successful head coach at Western Illinois. And so I just walked out on the floor when he was kind of helping the team go through pregame warmups. And I said, you don't know me. I said, but I looked in your bio and I said, I love watching your dad coach. And come to find out, I was bringing up the 1984 conference tournament. And he was like, I was 8 years old. I was at that tournament. I know exactly. And so now I've got it, now he's giving me stories about his team and what his dad's doing now. Those are the kinds of things that the fan doesn't see. That I talk to as many people as I can, and I may not use it on the air, but down the road, I might have opened a channel of, hey, I met you at this game. Do you remember me? I can't begin to tell you how many times I've networked with people and then they remember me or they call me up. And networking is everything. And I mean everything in what I do in terms of broadcasting. And if I'm going to tell a story on the air, another great source, if you ever watch before a game, I'm always talking to the officials. Have you ever noticed that?
I have. Yep.
Never, ever once do I ask them about a call. Never do I ask them about, how do you adjudicate an illegal screen? But I hear all kinds of good things, like the official who got hurt against Nebraska when we played USC, and she tore both of her hamstrings. The next game, we were at home, and Jesse Dickerson, longtime official, I've known Jesse forever. I said, hey, have you heard anything? He's like, well, her life partner is Chuck Gonzalez, my partner today. And so I waved Chuck over, and Chuck told me, how she was doing.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things to where I learned so much from officials. I'd be like, hey, I saw you were in Philadelphia last night. You had Villanova and Creighton, and they were like, oh, this crazy thing happened in the game. So I don't have a good answer for you. It's just, I think if you're just around and you're inquisitive and you talk to people and you're not afraid to talk to people, I get mad at young sportscasters who are afraid to go talk to a coach. They see him as the school teacher or the principal. Yeah. I had a person doing a game on Big Ten Plus years ago, and there were 3 different pronunciations and 3 different things for a mid-major, and they said, Mr. Coatney, how do you pronounce this? I'm like, I'm going to go ask. I'm going to go talk to the coach. Come with me. And they're like, oh, no. You come tell me what they said. No, get up out of your chair. They're just a person. So that's a lot of it, is just talking to people and being inquisitive. I love women's basketball, obviously. I never know where I'm going to get a story from, and it's been fun.
I think that's great. I would not have even thought that advice would work outside of this. Like, I just thought, like, how can we prepare better? But I mean, that's such good advice just in general of just not being afraid of going to ask the questions and meet.
Look at the Big Ten tournament. Okay, so you're in the media room of the Big Ten tournament, and I really the tournament's gotten so big now. It's so different. It used to be a lot more informal, and it used to be downstairs there in Indianapolis, where you could sit in that media room and really network with everybody and talk to people. It's my favorite thing about the conference tournament is talking to people. And they've, the TV has taken over, and there's 3 networks now, and they don't really I think they had you guys upstairs, didn't they? Is that where you were sitting? Everybody used to be down on the floor. So you could sit next to a writer or a broadcaster and just start talking, and then you start finding common ground, and you just through osmosis, you pick up a story or a factoid on something. And then the coaches have coaching seats there, and they're walking by you. I talked to Charlie Turner-Thorne, longtime coach of Arizona State, who's now doing scouting for the Washington Mystics. She was sitting behind me. I was sitting on press row at the Big Ten tournament, and one of the officials, I think it was Brenda Pantoja, was waving at me. Or I thought she was. I've known Brenda forever. But then I realized she was looking over my shoulder, so I turned around and I said, Charlie, I didn't know you were sitting behind me. I said, I'm sure you weren't thinking that Brenda Pantoja is waving at Matt Coatney. And so we started talking. Yeah. And we started talking about a game that Nebraska played against her in 2006. And I started asking her about all these players she recruited out of Spokane, Washington. So you're asking me how I prepare. That was 5 minutes with Charlie Turner-Thorne telling me why she was there and where all these players are. And it's all part of my preparation, just little things like that.
I just think that's great. And I think, again, that goes to there's just so much of that then makes sense of why you and Jeff are such a good team. And even in general, like I again told Nate Rohr this, we're so blessed with our commentators, like with you guys, and all of you have kind of been around for a while, and you know the sport, and you've gotten to know all these coaches and these teams and these officials and all of that. And it's just made for a much more enjoyable listen than, to be honest, like obviously the TV people are professionals, that is their job, but there's something so much more fun about listening to somebody who has this little personal story about somebody who's not just, and I'll say this, not just Alexis Markowski. You know what I mean? Like, you have stories about Kendall, about Logan, and you don't always get that with some of the national broadcasts because they haven't put that same amount and that type of work into
and
it.
they try. You know, every shoot around, the game day shoot around, the TV crew is there, and Jeff and I will sit down. You know, for example, Sloan Martin is a dear friend of mine, and you know, we'll communicate away from this. Brenda Van Langen is going to be the play-by-play announcer on ESPN for our game, and I've known Brenda forever, and she and I will exchange notes via email before this game, believe me. So they do the best they can, but again, they're looking at a broader perspective, as you pointed out.
Yeah. So I just, that was a great answer. It's a lot of work, and it is the ultimate prep work, because you've been prepping essentially for a long time.
It's work if you don't like doing it.
Yeah.
You know, the day that I don't like talking women's basketball or watching tape, you know, sometimes I'll send a snap to some of my friends, especially early in the season, if we're playing a team I don't know too much about. I'm like, you guys should be jealous because I'm watching, you know, Longwood against McNeese State or somebody. But, you know, at the end of the day, I love doing that.
Yeah. I had a friend ask me that the other day about when I told her I was going to the Big Ten tournament, and she said, well, do you still like that? And I went, I don't think you understand. This is a blast for me. And I'm brand new to this. Yes, I love this. And so I feel very similar. If ever this doesn't become fun for me, that's a sad day.
You know, every game I've ever done at Nebraska, about 15 to 20 minutes before I go on the air, I go to a quiet place and just kind of collect my thoughts. And the day that I don't tingle a little bit when I walk out of that tunnel is the day I need to stop doing this, because it's pretty special getting to watch Husker women's basketball and then being a part of it, even if you're covering it, you know, in whatever facet you are, because it's a pretty cool deal.
It definitely is not something that I at least take for granted, and especially that really solidified in the tournament, being one of the few there to cover it. It's just, it really is. It's so special, and I hope people understand. Like, I do, and I think our fans do, but I really hope our fans understand just how lucky, again, we are that not just that you guys are, but that you both still have that passion for the sport. So
no,
okay, we do this every time.
You know, but Jeff used to be a practice player. I don't know if I've told you that.
Really?
Did you not know that?
No.
Jeff Greash was a great high school basketball player at Wayne High School, and his rec team in the mid-1990s was the best on campus. And when the NCAA allowed, Pat Head Summit was really the one who spearheaded this, allowed male practice players, and they had to get certified by the NCAA. Angela Beck had a assistant coach said, go find 5 guys who know how to play. And they recruited Jeff Greash's male practice or his rec team to emulate the other team's plays. And that's how he kind of caught on with women's basketball. So Jeff Greash has a completely different path into women's basketball than I have, but we both come at it in different ways, but he always says we end up in the same place one way or the other.
Yeah. You're very complimentary of one another. That I should reach out to him. I bet he's got some fun stories.
Oh, unbelievable guy. Great guy.
Well, Matt, we're almost out of our, well, we don't really set a time, but we're almost at an hour. So I'd like to end with a little bit where we started, where I mentioned that, you know, the Big Ten has 12 teams in the tournament this year, which is a record number. We're going to disregard the fact that we added 4 teams, but all 4 of those teams are in the tournament this year. So that's a great addition for us. Are there any of those matchups that you are particularly looking forward to the early matchup, since we don't know maybe who they'll match up with next.
Yeah.
And I have the list if you would like them.
Yeah. I think Iowa can make a run here. And
Okay.
I know Husker fans may not like to hear that because Iowa's turned into quite the rival. But I think Iowa has been playing their best basketball right now. And I think that they're probably going to make it. In my bracket, I've got them in the Sweet 16. I also think UCLA is probably, I think, don't they potentially run into LSU? I think if they get later in the tournament, I don't like the matchup for UCLA against LSU because Kim Mulkey probably knows how to coach against a big as well as anybody. That's why I think USC is more primed than UCLA to make a run in this tournament, because while USC has very good bigs in Rhea Marshall and Kiki Ariafen, I think UCLA has become so dependent on Lauren Betts having a good game that if you find a coach who can shut her down, especially if Flau'jae Johnson plays for LSU, I think that's a matchup that I think would really not be advantageous to UCLA. I'll be interested to see what Michigan State can do in this tournament. They have flown under the radar, and I don't know why, because they've got a great strength of schedule. They've got a good seed. They've got some very quality wins, and they have enough depth. I think they can make a run in this tournament. So also don't count out Brenda Fries in Maryland. I think a lot of people were surprised that she got a home court advantage as a 4 seed. I think a lot of people thought they were going to be a 5. I think Brenda has flown under the radar this year. And if you get them on the wrong night, they can make you look terrible. I mean, they can. And you talk about Amy Williams and the injury she's overcome. But Cheyenne Sellers, this is her final go-around, and her knee is not 100%. And then Bree McDaniel being out most of the year injured. I think against the right matchup, Maryland can make a run. So look for Maryland to maybe pull an upset in that third-round game. Because Brenda knows what to do. I don't know if she has the horses because she's not very deep. So those are some things I'm looking for in the tournament.
That's awesome. This is, again, there's so many opportunities, and we've got some in the women's NIT. Minnesota's in that one.
WBIT.
Oh, yes. Sorry. The WBIT. I'm sorry.
WBIT. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Is it just Minnesota that's in that? I'm trying to, I thought we had two.
I gotta be real honest with you. I've not, I'm an elitist. If I'm not in the NCAA tournament, then I start looking at the other tournaments. If I'm in the NCAA tournament, it's all I can do to focus on all of that. I know a little bit about Minnesota being in there because my best friend Don West in Springfield, Missouri, is doing the Missouri State Oral Roberts game, and the winner of that would potentially play Minnesota. So he was asking me about Minnesota the other day when he found that out. So that's how I know Minnesota is in that particular tournament.
Yeah, I think there are only one, which would make sense given that who else is, that would be 13. Yeah. You've got 5 teams that wouldn't make it. That kind of makes sense. So awesome. So we have so many games to look forward to. That starts tomorrow?
Thursday. Yeah, the first 4.
First 4.
I saw on social media my good friend Bill Fenley at Iowa State is his daughter-in-law, Lindsay Metters Fenley, who used to be his point guard, who's a dear friend of mine. She had a post about them getting on the plane to fly to the first 4. So, it's starting. And, people always ask me when we're in the tournament about, did you see this game? When I get to Fort Worth, it's all about that tournament, and I just don't have time to watch the other games. And so I probably watch less basketball the third week of March than I watch any other time during the year.
Which is the opposite. That makes sense. So you got to focus in and get that going. Well, great. That's what I was hoping for. It's just a little bit of a look ahead of how some of these teams might do, who to look for in the tournament. I'm going to ask who do you think, who's taking it? Who's winning this year?
I believe I had. Boy, you put me on the spot here. I filled out my bracket yesterday. I think I have USC winning it all. Because as I told you, I think UCLA potentially, if they take on LSU, I don't really like their matchup. And then on the other side of the bracket, I have South Carolina, and everybody's trying to say that Don Staley got disrespected. And I'm like, well, they lost by 40.
Yeah.
to UCLA, and UConn run ruled them. So hold on a moment.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like those games didn't happen. I do like USC in big games. I think Juju Watkins is a big game player, and they've got enough players like Van Alhoffen, Iriafen that have played in big time games with other teams that I think that they're built to make a big run in this tournament. And I think that'll be a heck of a game if they end up playing South Carolina in the championship.
Yeah. Dustin always wants the Big Ten to win, my fiance, but is like secretly like, oh, but Purdue was the last women's team. And I went, no, honey. So he's in a very conflicted space where he would like the conference to do well as always, but holds on to that little bit of pride that Purdue was the last Big Ten team to win a women's national championship.
And that was a few years ago. Yeah.
More than yeah. We don't talk about that kind of ancient history, and because then he brings up other things that we don't talk about. But well, Matt, I appreciate again you coming on and giving this time. You guys fly out soon, and we wish you the very safest of travels and the best of luck in the first game. Last time when we left, your parting shot was your "You Betcha." I will leave it up to you if you have any parting shots that you would like to say, anything you'd like to leave us with. If you'd like to do your signature sound,
I did that before. I'm just going to say I really appreciate what you do. I get so many questions. I will probably do at least 7 radio interviews or podcast interviews this week, and I get a lot of the same questions because people like me tend to go to the same well. And I really enjoy your line of questioning because it tends to be more fan-centric. And sometimes I need to hear what fan-centric questions there are. And you make me think sometimes about. And so I appreciate your line of questioning and the things you wanted to talk about, because as much as I enjoy talking to our radio affiliates and my brethren in the sportscasting business, these are very thought-provoking questions, and I've really enjoyed them. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. I like to live by the saying of there's things we know and things we don't know and things we don't even know we don't know. And that's sometimes how I feel talking about basketball. So it's always very helpful. Thank you again. My parting shot is really simple, guys. Friday, 5 p.m. It says 6 p.m., but I think that's not central.
That's Eastern. Yeah, 5 p.m. Central.
Okay, good. Whew. 5 p.m. Central on ESPN. Watch the Nebraska Cornhuskers take on the Louisville Cardinals. Hoping for a tight game. Look for another Big Ten type matchup in terms of what the game might look like. And let's cheer them on. Let's go. Let's just make a run. Why not? Let's do it.
Go Big Red.
Go Big Red.
A Herd at Sports Network production.